What's going on today is eerily similar to what the US has done in the past. It's not just the same playbook, it's the same exact place. Oil. There's always oil. There's a lot of natural gas too, about $524 billion worth, according to the United Nations. It's a very resource-rich place. The United States would like to have that. That makes the Levant Basin a very good place to create a country from scratch. The occupation of Gaza and the West Bank has prevented the Palestinians from extracting their own resources. This wouldn't be the first time the West did stuff like this for oil. In 1952, Iran elected their first democratic leader, Mohammad Mossadegh, and then the United States were not happy with him because he said he was going to nationalize the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company, also known as the Anglo-Persian Oil Company. He was like, this is our oil, it's on our land, it doesn't belong to the UK. The US was very upset about this. The Anglo-Iranian Oil Company was also a client of Allen Dulles and John Foster Dulles. They were two brothers who also happened to be the head of CIA and Secretary of State at the time. They were not fans of Mohammad Mossadegh, so they couped that guy. The United States then decided the Shah would then be the leader of Iran, who was very friendly with the West. In 1954, the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company then became British Petroleum. Covert operations were efficient because you don't have to convince anybody you're a good guy doing this for a good reason. Being the world's greatest democracy is a lot easier when you don't have to be accountable to the public. So if the West wants oil, the West gets the oil, but I think there's more going on here than that. It's not that I don't think $524 billion is ample money to incentivize US intervention, there's just more going on this time. Chronologically, this is about a year after the creation of BP, so it's 1955. The US and the UK agree to finance the construction of the Aswan Dam in Egypt. This is where the Suez Canal is. It's very close to Israel. According to the U.S. Naval Institute, 12% of the world's ships pass through there. Not all of them make it through. You will remember a ship very famously got stuck there. It's not the best canal, but it's the one we've got. Or is it? The United States and the UK get a little bit upset that Egypt is friendly with the Soviet Union. This very much upset them during the time of the Cold War. They were like, we have beef with her. If you're friends with her, you can't be friends with us. And Egypt was kind of friends with her, and so that meant they had beef now. So they say, we're not going to give you any money. We're not going to finance the dam. So our boy, Mr. the brother, John Foster Dulles, decides to write a letter to the president of Egypt and say, guess what? We don't like you, we're pulling out. So, Egyptian President Nasser decides, I'm just gonna nationalize the Suez Canal. Sound familiar? This is our land, this is our canal, we built it, we're keeping it. At the time, the canal was mostly owned by French and British shareholders, go figure. Britain and France sent warships there to seize the canal, and they did this with Israel. Israel then decides to seize Gaza and the Sinai Peninsula. Egypt was like, you guys are really working with Israel, and then they expelled any American or Israelis from Egypt. It's an important canal. This throws a wrench in US global hegemony and the West trade and warships passing through. It's a big problem. Just a few years later, the US Department of Energy has some experts write up a proposal for them on the subject of using nuclear bombs to create a new canal through the Israeli desert. This plan was declassified in 1996. The way they drew it up, it passes right by Gaza. So the Israeli occupation of Gaza was very convenient for the United States' big plan here. But Israel would need to be on board, and of course they were. This past week, there was a leaked document of Israel's plan to forcibly relocate Gazans, 2.3 million of them, to the south, into Egypt, which would make a lot of room for their wonderful canal. Israel said this is just a proposal and not what they're doing, but it kind of sounds like dropping 6,000 bombs and 4,000 tons of munition on Gaza and telling everyone to relocate south would be executing the first steps of this plan. But again, they are telling us they're not doing it. But why would the US go through all of this international trouble, militarily and financially, just to get access to a canal? Well, it turns out they've done exactly that before. The US wanted a canal in Latin and Central America for quite some time. They wanted to do it through Nicaragua, because that would be faster and make more sense, but it was politically not feasible at the time. Sound familiar? They needed an alternative route. So they decided to covertly foment some discontent in Panama, which was a part of Colombia at the time, decide to support the rebellion they created in Panama, officially as the United States, and help Panama declare independence. They immediately recognized Panama as a state, and then the Panamanian government conveniently gave the US control of the canal. Shortly after we got control, Theodore Roosevelt was in a cabinet meeting and had the following conversation with his attorney general.
He said, Do they have any case against me? Can they accuse me of anything? And the Attorney General said, Mr. President, let us not allow such a great act to be tainted by any shadow of legality.
Then when Panama was not so friendly to the United States anymore and the Panamanian Defense Forces weren't happy with their leader, the U.S. decided to invade Panama again in '89, 75 years after it was officially recognized as a state. Sound familiar? The United Nations General Assembly called this a flagrant violation of international law. The U.S. called this just an act of self-defense. Sound familiar? This is a pattern of behavior. When the Nicaraguans democratically elected a socialist, everyone anticipated the U.S. would intervene again in 1979.
Latest polls today that came out in your own state, the Chicago Tribune pointed out, by a 2-to-1 majority, the American people oppose this administration in aiding militarily the Contras in Nicaragua.
Congress voted in the direction of public opinion, vowing to not intervene in Nicaragua, and then they did anyway, covertly. They actually used the recently set up pro-American government in Iran to transfer the weapons through Iran to Nicaragua. Currently, public opinion in the United States is vehemently against escalation. 66% of Americans want a ceasefire. Currently, Biden is trying to secretly send weapons to the Israeli military.
In the 6 months since the Iran-Contra controversy erupted, many people have come to believe there is something wrong with the way that this country makes foreign policy. They probably don't know how wrong.
It makes a lot of sense why Biden in 1986 was saying
it is the best $3 billion investment we make. Were there not an Israel, the United States of America would have to invent an Israel to protect her interest in the region.
Everything that's going on just sounds a little bit too familiar.
Let's put it this way. Money trumps peace sometimes.